right, what's up? Welcome back. Whistling in the Dark podcast. Today is Sunday, August 4th, 2019. I am your host, Patrick Bradley. And I just did an episode a couple days ago. And I'm back with my bullshit. So let's talk about mass murder. That's what's happened yesterday. There were two mass shootings in the United States. One took place in a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and the other one was in some kind of like downtown district outside of a bar or in a bar or something in Dayton, Ohio. So 20 people died and 26 were injured in Texas, and 10 people died, including the shooter, and at least 27 others were injured. And he also killed his sister, as he said. So I'm not really sure what was going on in that one, as far as like who the dude was or if he had anything to say. The other guy, the shooter in Texas, did put out like a manifesto or whatever. He's basically talking about the idea that eventually like the immigrants are going to come and they're going to the country is basically going to turn Democrat because of demographics, and it'll be a one-party system. And he mentioned something about like the Native Americans, like they didn't fight, and they're all but gone, and if we don't or whatever. So that's what this manifesto said. I don't. He also was like randomly interjected stuff about the environment. So I'm not sure exactly how that was part of it. Also, he didn't really kill many Mexicans. So I think he killed like 3 Mexicans out of the 20 people he killed. So definitely not sure. What it is weird. I mean, it was like a pretty coherent little 4-page manifesto. And then like the last piece of it was like, okay, I mean, in some, let's just say I've certainly heard that argument before, that there is this like, this is the reason you should be against, I guess any immigration. I mean, I don't know, illegal immigration. This is sort of just saying like any immigration. I guess it would be legal, because if they're voting and changing the sort of voting population or demographics, then they must be like becoming U.S. citizens. Anyway, I don't know that I care all that much about this guy's manifesto. I think it's, they're saying he's racist and he's a white supremacist, and that's why he did this. Well, number one, I mean, I certainly don't believe everything I read. So one reason that I'm not going to go to any like painstaking depths or, into any real detail in analyzing this manifesto is, I don't know that this guy wrote it. And I haven't really looked much into it. Can let things settle, see what comes out of it. But to me, like the underlying issues around this, and to me, like the message that's really important to get straight in our heads, as libertarians, doesn't matter what like this guy wrote on a piece of paper. As a libertarian, you're never going to get me to back up like thought police. I'm never going to back that idea, So whatever, the reasons were, it's sort of inconsequential to me, from like the perspective of regulations. I'm not saying I don't care what people think. Obviously I'm like putting out this podcast in some attempt to like sway people's thinking. But that's not what worries me. I mean, I like agree. I don't like racism and I don't like white supremacy, or I don't believe it. I also don't like necessarily believe that like the stuff that he wrote or, that was in this document is like racist, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I don't know if I talked about it in the last couple episodes, but I've been thinking about it a lot. I guess I talked about it last time, like the difference between politically correct speech. Maybe I didn't get to it. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like, obviously this guy is talking about a race. I mean, anybody that's immigrating across the southern border is like Hispanic. So, you would say, oh, he's racist against Hispanics. But I mean, his like point is that they're, voting Democrat, not that there's like some inherent, weakness in them. It's just that's like how they come in. Anyway, it's, there's definitely something to the propaganda of calling everything, like racist, and just painting this really, really broad strokes, and making the like boundaries that include, in someone's definition of racism it's really, really wide, and it basically comes down to you saying, criticizing a protected class of people is sexist or racist or, genderist or whatever is the protected class, criticizing them at all is called racist or sexist or genderist. And that to me is like the problem with, the politically correct speech. It's like just over the top. And it doesn't allow for, any real discussion. Not in any kind of like true, like transparent or honest way. You saw it with Trump and the guy from West Baltimore. I think it was a congressman. And, and just in general, they've been like beating this drum that Trump is racist for, ever since he kind of showed up on the presidential campaign scene, that he was going to run. Anyway, that it's a little bit, tangential, I guess, but it's also important, there's a lot of the rallying cry now of like, we like how dangerous white men are, and we've got to worry about the radicalization of it. There's citing of like really, really incorrect statistics, which I do want to go through a bit today. Let me just kind of read the Wikipedia summaries for these two, just in case, you missed some of these details or all of them or whatever, just to add that context. So the 2019 El Paso shooting was a mass shooting, took place at a Walmart store in El Paso, Texas, United States on the morning of August 3rd, 2019. The attack killed 20 people and injured 26 more. A single gunman is suspected of committing the shooting. He was apprehended by police shortly afterward and arrested. The FBI is investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a possible hate crime. However, no charges have been filed. The suspect, 20-year-old Patrick Crusius, was reported to be a follower of alt-right and pro-Donald Trump content on social media. Police believe that the suspect published a white nationalist manifesto online immediately before the attack. The apparent manifesto contains anti-immigration statements, cites inspiration from the Christchurch mosque shootings, and refers to the white genocide conspiracy theory as motivation for the attack. And the 2019 Dayton shooting, a mass shooting, was carried out in Dayton, Ohio, United States on August 4th, 2019 at 1:05 a.m. So late night on the 3rd, basically the same day, Eastern time. 10 people were killed, including the perpetrator, and at least 27 others were injured. The gunman was killed by police within 30 seconds of the first shots being fired. The attack was the second mass shooting in the United States in 13 hours following the one in El Paso. Actually, don't. He was carrying an Anderson manufacturing AN-15 with a 100 round magazine. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, they got him really quick. I actually heard a recording of the audio of that. It's it's pretty crazy. It's crazy that he was shot that many people that fast. It must have been like some really, really crowded. So, we got, I look a good bit at Twitter. I don't know why, it just pisses me off, but here's Beto O'Rourke talking about it.
El Paso will see on average 18 murders a year. That's the average over the last 10 years. We lost at least 20 people yesterday, and it took someone coming from outside of this community of immigrants to come and bring their hatred and their death to El Paso. And in the face of that,
it's so weird. When you look at, this is something I mentioned a couple days ago, but I mean, how does this guy not set off your radar? I mean, Trump does too. Like, Trump doesn't even, he looks so weird. But this guy just looks like he's just trying so hard to convince you of something that he doesn't believe. I don't know. Anyway.
This community has shown just incredible strength and love and is more than a match for this. We will overcome this. But something
like, we will overcome this. What does that mean? Like, you won't all pass away from grief? I mean, obviously you will. Fucking, most people are like, even in El Paso, or, their lives aren't changed by this, It's the people that are in it. And they got killed or had their friends or family killed, and he had none of that, But he's got to get up there and pretend like, oh man, this is so hard for him. I mean, this is like, just, this motherfucker is lying. Like, it's obvious. Like, he doesn't fucking care, He doesn't care.
He has to change. And one of the wives of one of the victims, he had been selling things to raise money for the soccer team he coaches, shot in the chest. His wife asked me, why is this happening in our country right now? Why will this continue to happen? How do we change this?
Like, is that, I mean, I don't even believe this conversation occurred. Like, who the fuck is saying that? Like, how can we stop this from happening in our country? Like, I mean, is that what you're thinking? Like, when your fucking husband just got murdered, you're just thinking, like, on a national scale about like, I mean, I would just be, if I was married and had kids and the wife of my kids died, or somebody really close to me was died, like, I don't know, I'd probably just be bouncing between just furious wanting to kill this person, the fact that this person's still alive, and just going through the grief of not having this like loved one in my life anymore. I just don't buy any of this, man. All this reaction, it's so contrived, and I mean, it's important, as much as it sucks to like sit here and pick apart responses to a bunch of murders and call people out like right on the heels of it. I mean, like, I'm responding to it. I'm not the one jumping out there and bullshitting everybody, pretending like I really care and pushing some agenda that I've been like just dying for another mass shooting to happen so I can push it. I mean, that's the vibe I get from these people.
And Jake, I've got to tell you, in addition to universal background checks, in addition to ending the sales of weapons of war into our communities, in addition to red flag laws, we've got to acknowledge the hatred, the open racism that we're seeing. There's an environment of it in the United States. We see it on Fox News, we see it on the internet, but we also see it from our commander-in-chief.
So open racism from the commander-in-chief. I mean, that's all I really say about him. But
it's
like
the way that the people.
Whoops. Yeah, I mean that it's just it's not. This is white. So this is like when you want to see like open racism. I mean, it's white men. You out of everyone should be fighting for gun control. As this goes on, you're the new terrorists, and with each day, it's getting harder to trust you or feel safe. Welcome to racial profiling. Only this time, statistics are justifying it. Like, and I'll go through statistics later because it's just some made up fucking shit, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson posted, in the past 48 hours, the USA horrifically lost 34 people to mass shooting. On average, across any 48 hours, we also lose 500 to medical errors, 300 to the flu, 250 to suicide, 200 to car accidents, 40 to homicide by handgun. Often our emotions respond more to the spectacle than to data. And I kind of get what he's saying. But, I feel like the problem with what he's saying is like, at least from their perspective, like the people that want to ban guns, and they feel like nothing like it, like these 34 deaths are just going to be ignored. Like that's kind of that perspective, right? And so like 300 people die of the flu, but like we're trying, we like give out flu shots and we do research and all this stuff, like, or medical errors. I mean, clearly doctors are doing everything they can to like not have medical errors. So I mean, I do think that actually this tweet's a little bit off. The only thing I would say, to me, the important thing is that what about that there were more murders than 34 in the United States in the last 48 hours that weren't this? So we're focusing on like a smaller number, even in the same like time period almost, And that's what I would say, that's the thing that gets ignored. And that's what drives me like bananas about this. It's I think that like the gun regulation, gun law stuff, that's like a much tougher, that's like a longer debate. Like I get why people, want gun laws. I mean, I don't think it doesn't take like, too much to like get that perspective. So for, normally for me, when we're talking about that, I kind of come at them and explain it from like the libertarian perspective, but, and I think it's normally like something they don't really hear. They don't hear that actually I do think that there should be regulations, but it's all done privately, and that there's this idea of responsibilities that go with rights, and that, when you sell a gun to somebody, I think that you have to vet that person. To me, that's the libertarian way, because you're giving out, you're giving something out that requires a lot of responsibility to have. And if you just sort of, and the example I always like give is like, if I give, a handgun to like a 4-year-old kid, and he walks into like a classroom and shoots another kid, like the 4-year-old kid that I gave the gun to or sold it to or whatever, he's not on the hook for that murder. He is, because he doesn't have he can't be responsible for that handgun. So, you would obviously look at me, the person that armed this small child, and, let him go in there with a loaded gun. So I think that, that sort of puts the boundaries around that. I think everybody can get that. And so what I'm saying is that is basically, that's always true. That's always the job of the person selling the firearm. And the problem with our regulations, the federal regulations, is that they basically take the gun, seller, they remove their liability. All they have to do is just, whatever the boxes they need to check for these like federal background checks or whatever, they do it, and then they're good to go, and they're never going to get in trouble because they can just say, hey, wait, these are the rules and I followed them, but in reality, they didn't vet. They're not vetting the people that they're selling guns to. And in fact, I think that in like the anarcho-capitalist society, you would actually probably see a lot more gun regulations. And I think that if you had private companies that their job was to do these background checks, and they did it as a service that you as a gun store owner would subscribe to, and you as a gun purchaser could also maintain an account with, that is like, could maybe make it like still just as fast and easy, but like way more effective. So that's like my, whatever 2-minute summary of where I stand, with gun control. And I do think that, it's an evolving thing with me. I don't believe that it's like the easiest topic. It's not like, monetary policy. Like that's like just so, that seems so cut and dry, from the Austrian, perspective. But the gun control stuff, I think it's there's some more subtleties. Like I think that's kind of like the next level, somewhat more advanced, like libertarian theory or something. But anyway, so yeah, so that's sort of, but him talking about 40 homicides, and we're only talking about, we're talking about 34 from this, and everybody is ignoring it. That is the to me, that's like the thing that drives me crazy. It's like nobody basically nobody cares that, like, all these people are getting killed every day, and it's about half of, I'll do the statistics a little bit later, but like, half the people killed in the United States are African Americans, and they don't make up anywhere near half the population. Now, granted, they're mostly being killed by other African Americans for sure, But to me, like, I think that is kind of part of the reason that it's just overlooked or swept under the rug, because as much as like people want to scream racism and say, oh, this is like a white supremacist problem or whatever, this is white men are the problem. And it's like, at the same time, in order to do that, you have to ignore all of the black people that are getting murdered every day, and so it's a fucking, like, it's a catch-22 they find themselves in. It's like to like focus on this and build their racist case against white people. They have to be racist and just be like totally desensitized to the killings of black people in the United States. Let me go. I've been kind of just winging it, but I do wrote some stuff down to try and keep a little order and not just go on like a 90-minute rant about these mass shootings. So the first thing that comes to mind when I see, or read something like this is basically the complete inverse of like the gun ban people. It's like my first like knee-jerk response is I want to carry a gun at all times. Like I want to be able to protect myself. I don't want, like, my first thing isn't, oh, how can I keep guns out of everybody's hands? It's, how can I protect myself and also like people around me, I don't have like a concealed carry, and I actually had a handgun that was stolen. So right now I have a shotgun, but I don't like roll around Atlanta with my 12 gauge. But I used to, a buddy of mine just moved away, and we used to like smoke a cigar almost every night of the week. And I live in East Atlanta. I mean, there's some murders, pretty close to where I live and stuff, kind of, all around. It's not like totally insane, but you hear gunshots a lot at night, and it's just pretty real. And I sitting out on my porch, like, I know that my buddy's got a gun on him, and like that's cool. Like I don't have one, and he's doing, like, to me, like, that's a big service, because I'm a hell of a lot safer because he went and bought that gun. He went and got his concealed carry permit and did all that stuff. Now, concealed carry permit's a whole other thing, right? The main reason that I don't carry is because of my aversion to going and doing that process and getting fingerprinted and stuff. But that's probably really stupid. Like, they, the amount of like tracking and stuff they have on us today, like, I don't think it really probably matters anymore. And I know, like, I don't know if you guys know who, what is his name? Chuck Bednarik. Bednarik used to, he was a Libertarian Party candidate for president a few years back there, a few elections back. And, I know, like, he would say, like, I'm not going to ask permission to do something that is like my right to do, which is to protect myself, and to carry a gun. Get that? I totally get that. But I'm going to wind up in prison if I ignore that and I get pulled over or whatever, or just something happens and I get searched and I get a gun on me and I never got a permit. I mean, I can go to prison for years. So, I mean, I totally get it. And you can be that freedom fighter. A person that I think of that's like that is Peter Schiff's father, he's dead now. He died in prison. But that's kind of the difference between Peter Schiff and Peter Schiff's dad. Peter Schiff holds, the same core values as his father. I think his father's name is Erwin Schiff. But, Peter Schiff's father, was a kind of tax protester, and he went to prison. I'm not sure how long he's been in prison or how long he was in prison, but he was there a while. The entire time I've known about Peter Schiff, his father was in prison, and that's got to be more than a decade I've known about him, and his father died in prison. And, I mean, I tip of the cap to him, because I agree taxation is theft, but, that's, I don't know, that's the difference between him and I guess. And I'm not, I don't know that there's necessarily anything wrong with it, because, I think I can influence people and do a lot of good, kind of spreading this word as a free person. But anyway, so, all right. So that was, another little tangent there. But the main point is that, to me, like, that just seems crazy. Like, hey, oh my God, like, this guy just came in, shot up this place, and then, your like instant knee jerk reaction is, oh my God, here, take all the guns, take my guns, take them all, because you think in this huge sweep of firearms that you will hopefully pick up the 0.001% of the population that actually does stuff like this, and their guns, like, they're not just gonna like bury them in the backyard or whatever. I think I saw a statistic, because it cited a lot in Australia. They did like a gun buyback, and I think they got like, I probably should check this before I say it, but it's supposed to be like 25% of the guns or something. So, in the US, that's still leaving like, 180 million guns out there or something. No, even more, probably more than 200 million, I guess. Anyway, so, but in general, my, reaction to a threat is not to like make myself weaker. I guess they, just like they see this as like weakening the threat. But to me, like, a much more certain way to be safe is, to work on my own self, my own protection and my own self-defense. And, you're never going to be perfect, right? Like, you could be the baddest, like, fighter in the world, have, 4 guns, an assault rifle, all loaded and ready to go. They could be in your hands. You could have a gun, and somebody could walk up behind you and just pop you right in the head. I mean, there's always like a way somebody can get you. That's one of the things. Like, I have kind of backed off a lot of the gun stuff, not for like any particular reason. It just, I don't know. I kind of got into it, and then it sort of became like a real focus. And then at some point it started to seem like that, like, there's just like a limit. I can always be more protected. But it's like, approaching some like asymptote of like 100% safe, anyway, so that's that, just about like the sort of initial reaction to it. Another thing then that I started to see posted about is, in some form, this post, and whether it's Instagram or Twitter, I've seen my friends post this, whatever. So 215 the day of 2019, 250 mass shootings in the U.S. in 2019, 268 killed in the mass shootings in the U.S. in 2019, and 1,025 shot in the mass shootings. The only accurate statistic is probably the day 215. I don't even know if that's true, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It seems like roughly, we're more than halfway through. So the year, 250 mass shootings. I mean, if there was more than one of these per day, then number one, why would the fact that 2 happened within 24 hours of each other be so shocking? And number two, why wouldn't they be on the news every single day? Like, why isn't there a new, El Paso shooting, whatever, every single day? So, I mean, it seems like extremely, extremely inflated. And I actually went through, so there was another report, and you'd have to go back to an older podcast, and I'm sure nobody is. So, but I'm not going to be able to pull it up probably right on the fly here. Well, we'll see. So there was another report. I know how to look it up. So there was another report that was like widely associated or bandied about for years, literally years. And the let's see. New mass shooting stat. Yep, that's the one. So, I talked about this. Let's see. This was episode 18 from September last year. So America doesn't actually lead the world in mass shootings. This was from the New York Post. Anyway, this was by a guy named John Watt and Michael Weiser, and they posted it August 30th, 2018. And a new report from the Crime Prevention Research Center just finished collecting cases using the same. So they're using the definition, I guess, that 4 or more people were shot. So one of the things they said is like these statistics grossly undercounted attacks outside of the U.S. and said out of the 86 countries, actually the U.S. ranked 56 per capita. Wow. Anyway, so I wish I. So, one of the things like they just tear into Trump for like saying incorrect stuff, which, fair play, he does. But like, here you go. The one thing we do know, this is from Obama, is that we have a pattern now of mass shootings in this country that has no parallel anywhere else in the world. To justify this claim, and many other similar notes, Obama administration cited a then unpublished paper by criminologist Adam Langford. So basically, this sort of just set off just everybody citing this thing and nobody really looking into it. And these guys started off as like trying to just verify it. They, and then eventually they did their own study because Langford wouldn't really help them out at all. He was like being kind of like weird or whatever. And so anyway, that a little bit off what we were saying there, but or what I was talking about. But I think that is actually really important. So people are working from really, really false sources with this. The other 250 mass shootings, it's like some website. Right. So there's something called the Gun Violence Archives. So mass shootings, right? Number killed. I'm just going down through them, right? Number killed, 10. That was in Ohio. That's the one we saw. 1, 0, 20, 2, 0, 6. 1, 140011400011010. So I don't know how many what's that, half of these are literally zero deaths. So I don't know, you couldn't be more wrong. So this 250 mass shootings, it's I think it's based on at least 4 people killed or injured, so they sum this up together. Anyway, I mean, it's good to track them, and you're free to like call it whatever you want. But if 4 people got injured, that's not a mass shooting make. So, and for example, I found this little article the other day, yesterday I saw this, but it just happened to come up. But in June 17th this year, Philadelphia Inquirer Post, there were 19 shootings, 28 victims, and 5 dead as the Philly weekend violence escalates. 28 people were shot in one weekend. 19 shootings. There were 19 different shootings in Philadelphia in one weekend in June of this year. And it did not make the national news because they don't give a fuck. It's not part of their narrative. They don't care about black people, and they don't care about the war on drugs because, a lot of their lobbyists profit off of that shit, I mean, come on. So anyway, so there was not 250 shootings. I don't know about the number, but I mean, obviously if you knocked out, like, again, nobody would call a shooting where one person died a mass shooting. I mean, that's just like a gun. I mean, now, like, why would you put a separate classification then? I mean, that's not what a mass shooting is. They're clear, you're clearly like, this is propaganda and you're falling for it. And sadly, I have many, many, many very, very stupid friends. They just can't not get duped, So what I wanted to talk about then was, so I see that, and what else do I see? I see other stuff. I mean, but so 293 people have been murdered in Chicago this year. The one city of Chicago. And even just saying like, okay, we'll go by your stupid, like, inflated numbers. There was the single city of Chicago has had more murders than this whole thing, and that's the point, is you guys don't fucking care. And an assault weapon ban isn't going to do shit for the fucking murder rate in Chicago, because there was an assault weapon ban. And when did it go away? In the early 90s? The murder rates in the 80s were fucking sky high. We've actually seen a decline, a steady decline in the murder rate since the fucking assault weapon ban got taken away. And it's because it doesn't account, assault weapons just don't account for a lot of murders in the United States. It's handguns. It's all handguns. If you want to stop, if you really wanted to ban the implement that people were using, you would ban handguns, not assault rifles. Because I mean, they're all fucking, we have like 15,000 fucking murders. Probably like 12,000 of them are from handguns or something. I promise you, out of I don't know what percentage of this 293 are shooting deaths, but I bet like 90%, 95% of the shooting deaths in Chicago this year were all by handguns, not assault rifles. It's like the fucking opposite of the truth. So, what else do I see? This is a white supremacy and toxic masculinity issue, not a mental health one. So this is another post by an obviously not intelligent friend of mine. I have a lot of them. So, and she doesn't try to show any statistics, whatever, because nobody has statistics on this. This is just being angry and not having enough brain power to withstand the propaganda. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. It's just like, I don't know what to say, but you look at, so it's a white supremacy problem. So that's the gun deaths in the United States are a white supremacy problem. I guess she's talking about the mass shootings, again, citing the wrong statistics, and not a mental health one. And now what's she referring to? She's referring to the fact that a lot of people point out that these people are on, like almost all the shooters have been on this certain type of like drug that psychiatrists prescribe them that can like make people suicidal or homicidal or something. It's like in the list of like possible, side effects. And I don't know how much there is to that. I don't really know, what goes into this. Like I said, I mean, I had handguns, for a while. Recently, I don't because they got stolen. But, you can pull off a quote unquote mass shooting with a handgun pretty easily. In fact, you can get like very far into a place without like setting off any like red flags to anybody because the handgun's easy to conceal. So if I wanted to get like to somewhere inside and like to a soft underbelly of something, it's a lot easier with a handgun than rolling up with a fucking rifle on my shoulder. But nonetheless, and I'm sure most mass shootings are done by handguns. Anyway, so, all right, so, but the point that they're saying is like that the mental health people, people that think that there's some issue there, is they're looking at this and saying, well, what's the deal with this? All these people are on these same kind of drugs, like what's going on? Again, I don't know if there's any validity to it, but I guarantee this fucking retard that posted this, she doesn't know it either. She's just talking out her ass and fucking like just crying to get the government to oppress some other people because that's just her whim, right? She wants the government to fucking, get its boot heel on some white men. And toxic masculinity. I would say that there's probably a lot more truth to the masculinity part. I mean, it's so toxic that it's killing people. Like I can't really get around that, and I feel like that's like pretty accurate. Most of the homicides are done by men. I mean, if there was like one profile you would ever do, it would be, what is your sex? Not gender, because that's, a subjective question. It's like, what is your sex? If you're a male, like you're just way more likely to kill somebody and also get killed. There's a lot of, but we're killing each other. Anyway, so I can't necessarily say much in opposition to that, but certainly the white part, it's just kind of not really well backed by statistics. Because again, as you'll see when we start to look at these statistics, you know, you start going down this path of wanting to target a race for a problem, and you get into some really murky water because the homicide rate for African Americans in the US is like, sky high compared to any other race, and especially African American males, because of our shared toxic masculinity. So, like going down this path, like it's, so what? Like, again, it's like, so they, like, what happens is, Beto O'Rourke says, we have 40,000 gun deaths a year. This has to stop. So he's not talking about mass murders with that statistic, right? That's actually mostly suicides. The lion's share of hand or gun deaths in the United States in a year are due to suicide. So he's talking about suicide, and then he's talking about an assault rifle ban. So, I mean, that's just like completely incongruent. Just fucking bananas to put those together. And only a willful liar would do that. So Beto O'Rourke is a liar. He is lying to you. He is trying to assemble, like, he's trying to first use this awful tragedy to further an agenda to get more control for his fucking team. And he is using this sort of emotionally charged situation and then layering in like erroneous statistics, like, and you can see, right? Like, this woman that I'm friends with, and this toxic masculinity thing, again, the male part, but the white, we have a white supremacy problem. Again, you'll see even in the mass shootings, you'll find out that actually white people are doing less than their share over like the last, like, whatever, 20 or 30 years. And if I'm not mistaken, the number of mass shootings has not been actually increasing. I wonder if the number of victims has, though, because we've been having some fucking big time number ones lately. I wouldn't be surprised if there more people have been getting killed in like the last 5 or whatever years. But anyway, so let's see if I want to say anything more about that in particular before I get to kind of like going through some statistics. Yeah, my take home message is that it really is hopeless. Like, I don't know. I think the main purpose of this podcast is just so to make me feel a little bit more sane. Like, at least I'm making some effort to say something. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that this person, and she's very representative of a lot of my friends, I just don't think they're smart enough, They're just not smart enough to like hear through propaganda, and they're really targeted, They're very, very targeted for this type of stuff. So I don't know. I don't think there's any hope in here, But I did want to go a little bit through some statistics. So, and I will put links to, where I got them from. The first, let's see if I might as well try to pull it up. The fucking name of this site. It's called, Statista.com, Statista. And I was looking at Mass shootings by race. Interestingly enough, they have a lot of different stuff, a lot of different things. You cannot look up homicides in the United States by race, only mass shootings. So, actually, maybe I will pull it up just because to give their little write up. So, one of the things I couldn't find exactly what their definition was. You do have to pay to get like I don't know, even to download it. You do have to pay to get access. So what do you let's just read their little write up. The statistics shows the number of mass shootings in the United States between 1982 and May 31st, 2019. So it doesn't include these last two. But, it's got most of them. By race and ethnicity of shooters. Oh, it shows the number by race and ethnicity of shooter. Las Vegas was the big one. That's the biggest. And they write kind of a bit of an opinion piece about it. It is kind of interesting. The high numbers of tragic mass shootings that have occurred in the United States has led to a large amount of attention on the profile of the people who commit such violent acts. A look at the worst mass shootings in the United States suggests no clear common connections other than a tendency to undertake mass shootings in educational institutions and other populated areas. However, a look at mass shootings in the United States by gender shows a great amount of mass shootings are carried out by men. Again, toxic masculinity. It's really tough to look past. With no clear patterns between the socioeconomic or cultural background of mass shooters, increasing attention has been placed on mental health. Analysis of the factors Americans considered to blame for mass shootings showed 48% of people felt that the inability of the mental health system to recognize those who pose a danger to others was a significant factor. Further attention has also been given to the factors influencing the behavior of mass shooters. Surveys on violence in the media and drug use as potential factors show many Americans place blame on these influences. So, they're not saying one way or the other. They're sort of saying that this is what people have been thinking. In the wake of multiple mass shootings, critics have sought to look beyond the issues of shooter identification and their influences by focusing on their access to guns. The study mentioned above showed 61% of Americans felt the easy access to firearms was to blame by either a great deal or a fair amount. So there you have it. You have access to firearms, and it seems like other people are looking at, these kind of mental health related things or violence in the media. And that was another thing that was kind of funny about my friend's post is she doesn't even mention like gun control in any way, right? It's just like pure, just like racism. I'm sure she wants to ban guns, but she apparently wants like the thought police to start like monitoring, people that voted for Trump or whatever. All right, but what do these statistics actually say? So since 1982, this Statista site, which is like, I don't think that there is like a known political leading to this. This is like a data and statistics, website. They just, do a bunch of this stuff. And they put it out. They put out free versions, and then they put out detailed like paid versions, and that's how they make money. So they claim there was 111 mass shootings since 1982, falling far, far short of the 250 since January 1st, 2019. And, think about that. That's 37 years, right? So that's 3 a year, exactly. It kind of jives with it. I don't know. Maybe we are seeing an increase. We just had fucking 3 in a row. But it's funny, right before that, I'd recently been thinking like, wow, I haven't heard anything in the news, about mass shootings in a while, because there was like the whole school shooting thing was a big, but I think largely this year we made it through the school year without much. Anyway, so that's a a big thing to note, and possibly this doesn't breaking it out per year. If you show that there is a significant increase in the frequency or severity, I would say, either one's pretty legit. At least something, right? Something to look at. But this particularly is going after the idea of the racial profiling, right? Like, remember what this other woman said about welcome to racial profiling or whatever. White men, you out of everyone should be fighting for gun control, because as this goes on, you're the new terrorist, and with each day it's getting harder to trust you or feel safe. Welcome to racial profiling. Only this time, statistics are justifying it. But what we find is they're not even close to justifying it. Out of the 111 mass shootings since 1982, according to Statista's report, 62 were committed by white men. 19, well, I guess they're men. I don't know, white people. 19 were committed by black people, 10 by Latinos, 8 by Asians, and then other unknown, and then 3 by Native Americans. So, wow, 62 out of 111 does sound like a lot. But, again, right, there's a shit ton more white people in the country. So what percentage is that? So 56% of the mass shootings since 1982 have been done by white people. 17% by blacks, 19% by Latinos, and 7% by Asians. But when you compare it to the population of the United States, at least our most recent number, of which we're declining, I think white people are declining, but whatever. I think it's like roughly the same. I honestly have no idea. There definitely weren't less like white people back in 1982. So, shit, I actually didn't write down what year this was. I think this was pretty recent though. Anyway, 61% of the population is white. 13 point, I can't read my own writing. 9% is black. 18% Latino, 6% Asian. So, if you look, right, actually per capita, who is more likely to commit a mass shooting? It's actually between white people and black people. It's actually black people, right? They comprise 13.9% of the population, say 14% of the population, and they have committed 17% of the mass murders. White people are 61% of the population, but only account for 56% of the mass murders, or mass shootings. The Latinos are by far the least likely group to go on a mass shooting spree. They comprise 18% of the population and only 9% of the mass shootings. And Asians are actually a little bit, so an Asian person is actually slightly more likely, according to these statistics by Statista, to go on a mass shooting spree than a white person. If you just randomly select two white people, or a white person and an Asian person, there's a tiny bit higher probability that the Asian person would go on a mass shooting spree. They account for 7% of the mass murders, mass shootings, and they are only 6% of the population. So when you actually look at the statistics, now, would I go out into the world and start giving fucking speeches based on these statistics, talking about how bad oh my God, like we got to watch out for African Americans because they're going to go on shooting sprees because they account for a higher percentage of shooting sprees than their percentage of the population. No. Why not? Well, number one, I would have to go read through this a lot more to see like what, if these numbers were like definitely accurate. Number two, there's only been 111. That's not like a lot of data to go on, right? And obviously, we're talking about mass shootings, so we're not going to get a whole lot. But, this ain't enough. This is not enough. When I was sort of kind of making a point, like sort of being sort of ridiculous by talking about like the Asians. I mean, since 1982, there have been 8 mass shootings committed by an Asian person in the United States. Like, it's such a fucking small number to draw statistics for their whole population is absurd. But you know what? It's just as absurd when it's 62. Like if it was 111 out of 111 or something, if just no other race ever did this, like I guess maybe you could, even though it's such a small number. But the fact that like the white people, again, this isn't splitting out gender or sex, white people are committing less than their fair share of the mass shootings is just fucking insane that this is the narrative. But, it's par for the course, right? There's never been, in my lifetime, there has never been a connection between the truth and what's said in popular media. Whether, you're talking about how the fuck we got into all these different wars, just all lies, costing millions of people's lives. For what? For, more money and more power. And it's the same people that want to push this shit for what? I don't know. More control, more money, more power. And, people are like, oh, well, why would they do this? Why would they do this? Like, is the onus really on me to have to further prove this point? Like, it's a fucking lie. I don't know. Go ask them if you want. But certainly, like, I don't have to give you a motive for them lying. I've given you the proof. I don't know necessarily why they're lying. I don't know. They're just shitty people. Like, why is that? Like, a lot of times it just feels like when I present stuff like this, it falls on deaf ears unless I like can kind of paint this whole narrative to like where they're trying to go. And it's like, well, but you get it. You agree that what they're telling you is the opposite of the truth, but you're still going to fucking turn on CNN again. You're still going to turn on Fox News again and just blindly fucking go off on an emotional tirade based on whatever fucking propaganda lie they pump at you, the next day you turn it on. It's fucking depressing. Anyway, so another really fun thing to look at is homicide stats, just general murder in the United States. This was like, that Ilhan Omar was talking about how white men are the most dangerous people in the United States and they should be profiled. So if you look at murders, this was in 2013. I think I got this off the FBI's website. I don't know. I'll try to look real quick. Sorry. I should definitely give this link in the show notes. Some of this stuff came from Wikipedia. Yeah. FBI.gov. Crime in the United States in 2013. I don't know how I found that. I was having a lot of trouble finding this broken out by race. I remember, like, Wikipedia did, but it's like a bit older or something. I saw. I don't know. I didn't really like the. It just wasn't quite enough. Anyway, so it's a kind kind of a weird figure. It was really hard. They were like breaking it out by victim and by perpetrator. So like it was sort of like a kind of like, a matrix. And you could say like, okay, how many Latinos were killed by Asians? And then like, find where those two meet, the row and the column, and you get that number or something. Anyway, what you find is 48% of the murders in the United States were committed by white people in 2013. Again, white people make up 61% of the population. 47% were killed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 47% were killed by black people, and the other 5% of the murders were just for others, Asian, Latino, whatever. I didn't break that out. So, again, what you see is Latinos have a ridiculously low, murder rate. Even if they were responsible for all that 5%, they make up 18%. Oh, you know why? This stat actually. Hispanic or Latino. Yeah. They don't put Asian. Anyway, this is about what I had seen before. I looked at some other Wikipedia stats and actually, so in 2013, there was slightly more murders by white people. 2,755 and 2,698 were killed by black people. So I mean, almost exactly the same. But again, it's the percentage of the population. When you have 14% of the population is black and they're doing 47% of the murders, right? Like, I'm not the one calling out, like saying racist shit. But when you start to say racist shit, that's total fucking lies based on bullshit data, totally bogus data. Like, I'm going to disprove it. And that's what I just did. I absolutely decimated that argument, absolutely annihilated it. There's no possible way you could hold on to this argument that white men need to be profiled or whatever when you now see what the statistics actually are. Not even close, where, white people are somewhere in between Latinos and blacks as far as being violent. And, and like I said, I mean, I get all of the, the Black Lives Matter stuff and it's fucking awful, the experience, I can only, imagine growing up in that, in that environment. And it's not like, to me, the important thing as, a libertarian or whatever is to recognize that this is not like just a free market phenomenon that, that is, I think, totally incorrect. And, you really have to look at the effects of the welfare state and the war on drugs that has really, really disproportionately done damage to the African American communities in the United States, particularly in inner cities. I was hearing, I actually saw some video, some black guy put up there. He was basically switched, I guess, to be like a Trump supporter, and he was talking about why, and he was talking about why it's so like how he just realized it's so ridiculous to like think that like the Clintons were the ones that were pro-black and Trump was the racist one. And It's like a pretty interesting video. I mean, I've definitely like seen that, or I've thought that it's kind of a joke to think that like Hillary, super predator Hillary, Bill Clinton, who passed the crime bill, it's just absolutely demolished, African American families in the United States, getting people locked up for fucking, decades for like a little bit of crack or something. Shit is so fucked. But yeah, so that was interesting. And if you look at, this is something you can get off the Wikipedia, incarcerated Americans from 1920 to 2014. You look in the 80s, starting in the 80s, it just hits this like crazy inflection point, that, I mean, maybe even in the 70s it started growing, but I mean, it looks like the price of Bitcoin or something. And it just skyrockets until, I don't know, early mid 2000s. And then it sort of drops and then goes up again a little bit. But there's almost 2.5 million people in jail right now. And so many of them are African Americans. And like, you talk about a cycle, like jail ain't fucking helping anybody, and it's making it worse. It's taking them away from their kids. They have kids, like, it's crazy. Another really, really surprising statistic I saw was violent crime rates by gender, let's say sex, 1973 to 2003 per 1,000 people. So from males in 73, it was almost, and actually popped over 70 per 1,000 in the early 80s, late 70s. And by 2003, it was below 30. It was about 25, 26. So dropped from 70 to like 25, right, over this period of time. Huge drop, almost to a third of what it was. It dropped 45 points on this scale, and it's only at 25 now. Females saw pretty steady. They started at 31, it looks like, in 73. Had a bit of a rise, then had like a spike over 40, like 42, 43, which coincided at that point. Men were at like 60, 61. But yeah, it's kind of weird. So the male violent crime rates saw a big drop starting in the early 80s, and then it kind of leveled off like right around 1990, and started kind of bumped up a little bit, but sort of leveled off. But the females starting in like 1990, 89, they like saw a pretty big jump by like 10 points, and then have slowly been tapering off. But the male violent crime rate actually has been dropping faster. So right now, females are like, it looks like 19 and males around 25. I mean, they're very close. When they started at like 31 and like almost 70. I would say, I've been alive for a large portion of this, and like this does not jive with my like anecdotal experience in life. I'm not saying it's definitely wrong, but like, what the fuck, violent crime? Like, at this point, let's just add them up, 25 and 19, 45. She's saying like almost 20 out of every 45 violent crimes in the U.S. are committed by females. This doesn't seem possible. I'm still kind of more on this toxic masculinity thing. That seems more right. So you see homicide rates, offending rates by race, very high, very much higher. This was, also on Wikipedia. So right now, and okay, so it was in 80, 50 out of 100,000 for African Americans. It went down in the 80s and went up. Like 1990, it was like the highest. It was just a little over 50, and now it's dropped down. Well, this doesn't even get to 2010, but whatever. It's like 25 per 100,000. And for white people, it like started at 6 or 7 out of and dropped down around 4. So not a huge change, but a little. It's on the decline, for sure. So, but what's that? So we're talking about like 25 to 4. It's almost like that's almost 6 times higher, the homicide rate for African Americans than white people. So, again, I am not pushing any kind of fucking bullshit racist legislation. In fact, I'm trying to push for the repeal of the racist legislation that I believe has led to this disparity. I don't think that this is, some fucking inherent racial flaw. I think it's fucking, just federal government policies that just like disproportionately target black people and affect them and have fucked up their families and, really, really disproportionately put them in prison. I think they make up like more than half the prison population. Probably like way more than half. I'm not even sure, but so where do we go from here? The murder rate overall, let's also think about this, right? Like the gun banning rhetoric is a fevered pitch, right? Okay, so when did the Clinton assault rifle ban go away? It expired. 10-year ban. It was passed in 94 and expired in 2004. So 94, 2004. Actually, there was a big drop in the murder rate. And then, so it went from 9 to 5.5, and then it got down to a low of 4.4 since then. It's actually been a little bit of an uptick. 2014, it got down to 4.4. So in the 10 years after the ban, it went down, another 1.1. But, it was starting pretty low. And then it went back up in 15 and 16, and then there's been a slight decline in 17, but they don't have any more stats on that. So it was also like their crime bill, if I'm not mistaken, was passed around then. So the other thing I wanted to mention, and this is just like some old shit I stumbled upon, but courts, I don't know what QZ.com is, but apparently they're probably anti-Trump. I don't know. Maybe they're reasonable. I don't know. But this was a good example of, getting like you just sort of shifting statistics around until you lose the meaning. And it actually doesn't say what you are implying it says. But, like my friend and her post today, most of my friends, they're just not going to be smart enough. And they're not going to spend the time it would take. I mean, I think they could get it if you sat there and explained it to them. But they're not going to spend the time to check any of this. Here are 4 charts on race and murder in America to tweet back at Donald Trump. So he tweeted something about, U.S. crime statistics. And so it's some post that says, blacks killed by white, 2%. Blacks killed by police, 1%. Whites killed by police, 3%. Whites killed by whites, 16%. Whites killed by blacks, 81%. Blacks killed by blacks, 97%. So it's probably hard to follow what I just said, but the big one that I think is really incorrect is that white people killed by white people only make up. Yeah, I mean, out of the 3,000 white murder victims in 2013, 2,500 of them, excuse me, were killed by white people. So, I mean, that's just, that's flat out wrong. So, okay. So, granted, they're calling him out because he put out a wrong statistic, and clearly, like, he says that whites killed by blacks was 81%. It's probably the fucking inverse, right? It's probably whites killed by blacks was 16%, and whites killed by whites, it's 81%. Blacks killed by blacks, 97%. It's probably, I don't know, might be about right. I don't know. It's high. Most black people are killed by other black people by a high percentage. They say the clearest discrepancy between these figures and Trump's is that the overwhelming majority of white American murder victims are killed by other white Americans. And, I saw somebody say this today, and it was, I mean, at the end of the day, like, what, like, the crime research people really say is that people kill people near them, It's not, I mean, it's just always, it's always true. Normally, it's like somebody kills you, right? So, anyway, so then they start saying, they start making what they are saying are the real statistics. So black people killed by white people is 7.6% of total victims in the ethnic group. Whites killed by whites is 82%. Whites killed by blacks is 14.8%, and blacks killed by blacks is 90%. So, it's all pretty close to what Trump said, except you fucking invert those two big ones. But I just mean that, like, these numbers aren't drastically different. I'm pretty sure if you just flip-flop those two, he's largely right. Another way, and now this is where they fucking lose the plot. Another way to look at these numbers is to take deaths as a share of the victims' population based on 2014 estimates from the U.S. Census. That's a measure of the risk to any person dying at the hands of each ethnic group. Here again, whites are at far higher risk of being killed by other whites than blacks. It does, however, underscore that a black person runs a far higher risk of being killed by another black person than for any other combination. Obviously, that's true. Yeah, I don't know what he's saying. So, okay. The problem with this is you're you're saying that a white person, like, you're saying, how likely am I to become a victim of a killing by a black person? But you're only saying that because it allows you to divide the number by the much larger number of white people. But why aren't you asking, like, there's no reason that that's the question to ask when you could also say, how likely is a black person to kill a white person? And now you've got to divide by the much smaller black population. And I mean, doesn't that kind of seem like the more sort of intriguing number? I mean, it seems like the less deceptive number. Like, so you're just saying, well, yes, a black person is much, much more likely to kill a white person than a white person is to kill a black person. But because there's just so many white people, chances are a bullet's not going to hit you, right? That's that statistic. So I just thought it was funny that while they're absolutely correct, like absolutely, these statistics that Trump published or tweeted out were wrong, and I'm sure you just added to a long ass list of wrong shit this dude has tweeted out. But your follow-up is to, sort of like munge around the numbers, until you can come up with a way that sort of makes, your sort of predetermined position on the matter, easier to prove out, and it's disingenuous. It's like it's literally saying that it doesn't matter as much to kill white people because there's more of them. I mean, that, like, if you're attaching morality to these statistics, which you're clearly trying to do, I mean, it's not right. Now, what else could we do? We could stop being racist and stop trying to fucking pick everything apart by skin color. Wow, what an idea. But somehow that would make me a white supremacist. And I promise anybody that would listen to this podcast is going to be like, so any fucking like Democrat voter or liberal or whatever, this is somehow white supremacy at work. But it doesn't matter that the people are lying to you, giving you wrong statistics, capitalizing on the murder of innocent people, and using that as an opportunity to lie to you and get you in a vulnerable state to push their agenda so that they can get more money and more power. Remember, right? These are the people that also have been running endless wars in the Middle East. Same people, right? Remember, same people. So, I think that's it. I talked about Beto O'Rourke. I talked about the idea of his saying, there's 40,000 gun deaths, but then obviously trying to conflate this tragedy, in that, saying, oh, well, now, if we ban assault rifles, which, account for just a tiny sliver of like the problem, you got more murders in Chicago than you'll have in all of the mass shootings, possibly since 82. I mean, depending on how you're, like, I don't buy this 250 number at all. And according to Statista, there's been 111. So, I mean, it's probably more than mass shootings in Chicago, since we know one of them was like in the 50s and the Orlando nightclub one was in the 40s and what have you. But yeah, anyway, and I already kind of went through the whole gun control argument. I sort of went out of order from my notes. So, that's basically where I stand. I mean, I do think that there should be vetting of people before they have guns. I just think it should be done by companies that are, open to competition from other companies trying to give that service, but do it better and in a more cost-effective fashion to both the business and, the gun purchaser. There's just no doubt, like these, whoever is setting up the, the current legislation, there's no like feedback mechanism, right? Nobody's gonna get, like, Bill Clinton, passed this crime bill that was just horrific, absolutely horrific, particularly for African Americans in the United States, and it did absolutely nothing. Like, there's no fallout in his life whatsoever. And I mean, even on like a voting sense, there wasn't even fallout from the African Americans. Like, they're still mostly just voting Democrat. So there's just no consequences, where a private company, if it turns out that they're saying they're doing this background check stuff and it turns out like they're not and they're deceiving, I mean, they're going to be open to like getting sued and losing their company or just simply, another service being chosen in place of them to like vet the person. But anyway, I'd already kind of gone through that. So that sort of sums it up. More terrible shootings. I obviously completely avoided all the kind of conspiracy theory side of this for now. I tend to sit back with stuff like that and just see what people say. I'm certainly wide open to it. I mean, I've heard multiple accounts. I saw a woman interviewed, and she said that they saw 3 or 4 people in all black run in, and during the shooting or doing the shooting or whatever, and multiple accounts of multiple shooters dressed in all black, and that's in El Paso. Clearly, this kid had khaki pants on. He did have a black shirt on, but he's obviously just one person. And I get that like these first, witness accounts are probably tough. People are super freaked out, but it's hard to confuse one person for 3 or 4. I guess, maybe the cops and they just got confused but I don't know when the cops arrived and I don't know. Anyway, so, there's that, that certainly I'm wide open to a possibility of it being a false flag or anything. I just, don't have much information about it at the moment. And I do think it's an important, it's obviously a very important topic, but I think there's a lot of other important stuff around this, which is like either way, nobody's going to believe the conspiracy theory. So either way, you got to get this gun argument straight in your head. And like, I'm not open to the idea of giving up my ability to defend myself. Like, I don't trust the police to defend me, so I don't want to walk around unarmed. And my response to a violent act like this is that I want to be able to protect myself. I don't want to give up, my ability to do that. So that's one thing. And another thing is to think about what you really believe with regulations. And if you kind of see things the way I do, that actually the free market and property rights and the non-aggression principle and stuff can actually come together pretty nicely to control the spread of firearms and the ownership of firearms, but in a way that is not aggressing, right? Like, a gun store owner does not have to sell anything. He is not violating the NAP by not selling somebody a firearm. But if somebody's just like completely out of their minds, or like a little kid, and the gun store owner sells them a gun and that person then goes shoot somebody else, I think to some extent the gun store owner has aggressed against the victim of the shooting. Because, think of like, yes, he didn't directly plan to go shoot that person, but that does not matter, right? Like, think about pollution or something, right? If I dump a bunch of like toxic waste, into a river, and you happen to be downstream of it, or you like go swimming in that river, and it's your private, whatever, you're allowed to be there, and you get sick or whatever. Like, I didn't like pour the toxic waste at you, but it wound up hitting you, So yeah, I think that's aggression against a peaceful person. And in the case of the little kid with the gun, I think that this kid doesn't really have the wherewithal to aggress on their own, And so you got to look at like who supplied these means to this child who is unable to be responsible, or extrapolate it out like a schizophrenic person, a person like that has a history of violence or something. You know what I mean? Like if it's in your community. So anyway, like, but to me, like that's the idea of how the NAP works, and I think it would be far, far more effective, than like anything but just like 100% ban, right? I mean, if the government would just said all guns are illegal, and if you get caught with any gun under any circumstance, you're going to prison. I mean, that would probably be pretty effective, but I obviously wouldn't be for that because I don't trust my government at all. My government has murdered tons and tons of people. And it's actually the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about. It was just to remember how bad, these people that like these like liberals and stuff, they want to turn all our guns into this crew. And I found this one article on Global Research, is the name of this website. I think globalresearch.org and or .ca. Oh, it's Canada. I found an article that a guy named James A. Lucas wrote, and he published it just in June of 2019. Maybe that's just when it was first published in November 2015. Okay. The title is U.S. has killed more than 20 million people in 37 quote-unquote victim nations since World War II. And this is a very long article, so I'm not going to go like super duper far into it. I'm about an hour and 40 minutes into this podcast. But and I also don't know this guy as I tried to look him up a little bit. He's written some other articles and maybe some books. But it seems pretty thorough. Like I said, I mean, like we just found out, like without really looking at statistics and stuff, unless they're pretty simple, it can be pretty easy to kind of twist them into what you want them to be. But he has the 37 victim nations: Afghanistan, Angola, Argentina, and then he says South America, Operation Condor, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Bolivia, Brazil, Cambodia, Vietnam, Chad, Chile, China, Colombia, Cuba, Democratic Republic of Congo is formerly Zaire, Dominican Republic, East Timor, El Salvador, Grenada, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Hungary, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq. The U.S.-Iraq war and the sanctions against Iraq extending from 1990 to 2003. Iraq-U.S. war started in 2003 and has not been concluded. So it's two separate sort of things. Israeli-Palestinian war, Korean, North and South, Laos, Nepal, Nicaragua, Pakistan, Panama, Philippines, Sudan, Uruguay, Yugoslavia. Notice there's no Yemen. So there's a note about that up there. Right? This was written in 2015. But think about, that list, just that list. These are all countries that the U.S. has sent troops into and fought. And, we know, for sure that they just fucking lied and attacked Iraq, just made up WMDs, they made up the yellow cake, they made up the connection to Iraq, to Al Qaeda. It didn't even make sense. If you actually thought about that, why, the connection between Saddam Hussein and Al Qaeda is ridiculous. They were probably adversaries, if nothing else. Let's see here. I want to just read a kind of summary of this. Uh, so he, let me just, so he has comments on the gathering of these numbers, which I think that's pretty interesting. And he has a bunch of sources and stuff at the bottom. So generally speaking, the much smaller number of Americans who have died is not included in this study. Not because it's not important, but because this report focuses on the impact of the U.S. actions on its adversaries. An accurate count of the number of deaths is not easy to achieve, and this collection of data was undertaken with full realization of this fact. These estimates will probably be revised later, either upward or downward, by the reader and the author. But undoubtedly, the total will remain in the millions. The difficulty of gathering reliable information is shown by two estimates in this context. For several years, I heard statements on radio that 3 million Cambodians had been killed under the rule of the Khmer Rouge. However, in recent years, the figure I heard was 1 million. Another example is that the number of persons estimated to have died in Iraq due to sanctions after the U.S.-Iraq war was over 1 million. But in more recent years, based on a more recent study, a lower estimate, around 500,000, has emerged. Often information about wars is revealed only much later when someone decides to speak out, when more secret information is revealed due to persistent efforts of a few, or after special congressional committees make reports. Both victorious and defeated nations have their own reasons for underreporting the number of deaths. Further, in recent wars involving the United States, it was not uncommon to hear statements like, "We do not do body counts," and references to quote-unquote collateral damage as a euphemism for dead and wounded. Life is cheap for some, especially those who manipulate people on the battlefield as if it were a chessboard. To say that it has been difficult to get exact figures is not to say that we should not try. Effort was needed to arrive at the figures of 6 million Jews killed in World War II. But knowledge of that number is now widespread, and it has fueled the determination to prevent future Holocausts. That struggle continues. The author can be contacted at jlucas511 at WOHR.com. Interesting. Maybe I'll reach out. Let's tell this guy, hey, cool article. And maybe I can find out more about it. Sorry, okay. Just wanted to set that up for later. So he's going all the way back since World War II. So, yeah, it's been a long time for sure. And so since that time, I'm going to guess that we've kind of killed about 1 million people on our own inside the United States. And so let's see, homicides per year, U.S. Oh, that's not helpful. All homicides, 19,000. So let's just say 20,000. Nope. Oh boy. So we have I don't know why I'm doing this. So we have 21 3 times 3. So maybe 1.5 million, if I'm actually reading that number right on my little terminal. Yeah, 1.5 million. So that's all of the murders in the United States combined over that same period of time. And this guy's saying Well, we've also killed about 20 million people outside of the US, and that's what our military's been doing. So, again, right, I'm not like arbitrarily giving more value to American lives. So clearly, right, and that's also 1.5 million people killed by like 300 by a group of like 300 million people. Right. So again, when you're getting to percentage, what's the homicide rate of a American citizen versus like American, military men? I mean, obviously the military is like built for that, but they've killed 20 million people over that same time. So anyway, excuse me. I wanted to sort of put that out there to give some context that we all also really, remember that the people that that the liberals want to give control to are the same crew that's killed 20 million people. So they've killed 20 million people. And like, look at that list of countries, like what do we do any good in any of them? When we're just attacking countries. I mean, I have not spent much time, and nor am I like an expert on it, but it's something I've wanted to do. But really, like, go more over like the 80s and 90s and everything that happened in Central America and South America, because I think people like think that like somehow Bill Clinton wasn't a warmonger, but I mean, the lion's share of that list was like South American, Central American countries, So it's just like everywhere. I mean, look at these places we attack and just kill a bunch of people. And I mean, are they any better off? Like, are there like, these countries now thriving in South America and Central America because of all the bombs we dropped, and we probably propped up a bunch of fucking drug lords, to get the fucking cocaine through so that they can sell it and they can buy the guns, i.e. the Iran-Contra, affair. So that's proven. Oh, man. So anyway, I guess that's kind of all I got to say today on the topic. I was not planning on doing it, but I just kind of was reading all this stuff and getting annoyed, and it's such a bummer that like another fucking, another mass shooting. So, I don't know, keep your head up, learn about this stuff, if this is like confusing, if you're feeling, for me, when I'm feeling like frustrated and kind of scared, it feels like, the country's like falling apart, or the government's just getting crazy, and it just like people are just for some reason just piling on even worse. Like they're not seeing this for what it is. I find like the best thing that chills me out is to like get down to like more basic like theory, like economics, read a little Mises or Rothbard, or read about what people are saying on the libertarian side about gun control, because I don't think it's like a simple, obvious thing. And honestly, like most of my thoughts on it are really like just logical pieces that I've put together over the years. I couldn't really direct you to somebody that I think has like really cracked the code on libertarian gun control and has said it in a really good way. It may be out there, and I'd certainly be interested if anybody, if you're watching on YouTube, certainly drop it in the comments. And otherwise, if you want to send me a message on Twitter, Patrick J. Bradley, Gab, we're Whistling in the Dark, and on Facebook you can just search for Whistling in the Dark podcast or whatever, and find it. And I actually joined D-Live. I've been toying with the idea of possibly starting to live stream, but I think it will come in mono at first. I have to figure that out, as I have a nice mic and I don't want to buy some like BS USB mic or something just to do live streaming, because I got this mic and preamp. I mean, it's really nice, but it's just the nature of this technology. It comes in as as mono. So anyway, I mean, look into that. But yeah, you can find me on any of those things, and I would love to have some discourse on this topic or any others that interest you. And decided to well, like I said, I wasn't really expecting to do a podcast today, so I didn't. But in the I think the next one, I took another little break from the kind of pedogate EPR research because it wears pretty heavy on me. So just like today, I just didn't really get into it. I decided to take on this happy topic instead. But I will get back. I think I'll get back to it. And I didn't want to say like, it does weigh heavy on me, and it is, I think that there's really something to the fact that like that all these, different people that are researching it, wind up dead, whether by suicide or whatever, and like, I was thinking the other topics that I get into, I mean, I can't think of anything like this, I mean, Scott Horton is like, I mean, he is as opposed to the government as you could possibly be, just constantly calling out and ferreting out all this fucking backwards evil shit they do, just, calling out names, people that are murderers, that are treasonous, and he's not in any danger. They're not trying to kill him. He's just not going to make a lot of money because this is like the path he chose. And he's a very, very brilliant person that could probably do any number of other things that would be way more lucrative. But he's doing this, and God bless him. But then when I, there's just something about this, like, pedophile ring shit with the elites, and I don't know, for me it's like I can just feel the weight of it on me when I'm like looking into it, and it just weirds me out, like. And anyway, what I think the next thing, aside from if more news or something comes out, but I don't think anything has come out in the last 2 days. And the thing that I would like to do is look into that list that Steve Altram, the crypto beast, had on that on that blog post of all the different like pedogate researcher people that have like died or went missing, in a relatively recent period of time. I've never seen like just a list, that just sort of simple, like bam, 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 bam. And so I think I'm going to look into those and each of those people, and also see if there's any other that maybe he left off. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to crack the case or whatever, but I think, it's another thing that's funny is I've never gotten like pushback for my podcast. Been doing it for more than a year now. I mean, I'm not super prolific. This is the 35th episode. But in the first 30 or so episodes, I mean, nobody's ever pushing back like, but the right when I step into this, and I've actually done a pedophilia episode, or where it was one of the main topics. It's in the title. I was about the Catholic Church when all that stuff came out, and I talked. I think I may even have mentioned Epstein in there. I mean, that was before he got arrested again. This was last year, like September or something in 2018. But yeah, I talked about just that, and I talked sort of in general about other things, but it's mainly focusing on the thing that was in the news, the Catholic thing. And people will like have accused me of jumping on the quote unquote bandwagon. Like, what kind of fucking disgusting bandwagon is pedophilia rings, you know? Like, and another person was like, called it link bait or whatever, which is like, you know, that's not the correct usage of that term, right? Like it's not link bait. I mean, I guess I kind of know what he was getting at, but you know, he wasn't right. Go clickbait, link bait. But he's like, accusing me of clickbait. But like that, but clickbait is when you don't actually talk about what's in your title. Like you just put something in there to get clicks. But I mean, I talked a whole ton about Tracy Twyman. And yeah, so it's funny because I commented about how there's so much like weird infighting and shit in all, you know, all that group. It's like, what the fuck are you guys fighting about? Like, as long as you're not also raping kids, like you're all on the same team. Like, get it together, you know? Like you're not part of it. Like you're just looking around trying to like find out what's going on. But you know, like, and to like not want more people to talk about this topic. I mean, like, unless you're actually, you know, trying to cover this up, I can't understand why, you know, you would want that. I mean, why on earth would you want this to stay quiet? You know, people that are like saying stuff like that to me, you know, it's so fucking stupid. It's just like weird, you know, it's like you're not the story, you know, you're just like, you're just like trying to report on it. You're not the story. You know what I mean? And anyway, I mean, the idea of like not wanting people to talk about this seems to only point to like the only underlying motive I can think for that is that you want this covered up, that you actually don't want information about Tracy Twyman getting out. You know, what other conclusion is there? Anyway, so I do want to do that show next, hopefully, unless there's a whole bunch more mass shootings or maybe the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan. I don't think I've heard, you know, no more updates there. I did hear something about a bunch of U.S. troops going into Saudi Arabia, which is like kind of eerie. They were saying it feels like what happened before we invaded Iraq. We started building up troops there. So, you know, hopefully where in this case where there's smoke, there is not fire. But there you have it. Keep fighting the good fight, and I will keep talking this shit. Peace.